Hey there, Professor Fields here. This is AJ 100, Introduction to Administrative Justice. We are in Chapter 13, the Juvenile Justice System. And in this section, we're talking about our Module Learning Outcome 13.1, which is discuss why the doctrine of Parens, Partiae, shapes them and maintains a juvenile justice system. The juvenile justice system is based on a couple of concepts. One is that youth need protection and understanding rather than punishment. And its focus is on rehabilitation and what is in the best interest of the child. That's compared to the adult juvenile justice system, which looks more towards the five things we talked about in earlier chapters, more towards punishment, restorative justice to society, stuff like that. But the juvenile justice focuses on rehabilitation and the best interests of the child. This is all grounded in English law. Back in the 18th century, children who did something wrong were treated like they were adult criminals. There was no juvenile justice system. There was no juvenile detention centers. If you got taken to jail, it was with an adult. Didn't matter if you're 10 years old or if you were 100 years old. Punishment was harsh. In this photograph in here is a chain gang of people working in the fields. There was no efforts to rehabilitate or protect the children. Starting in the 19th century, population started to expand, especially in the larger cities, and there started to be a lot more juveniles that were abandoned by their parents. When in an agricultural-based society, you worked on the farm, but in an industrial society, when you lived in the city, parents sometimes would abandon their children, and they would need protection. Some of these children went out and, in order to survive, committed crimes such as theft of food and other behaviors like that. During the 19th and 20th century, the child savers emerged. Basically, they believed that the children were a product of their environments. In other words, if you were abandoned on the street as a child and you couldn't survive by any other means besides stealing food, that's what you did. You stole food. And they initiated some efforts to build institutions designed to rehabilitate juveniles, such as the House of Refuge. They provided shelter and structure for dependent, neglected, or even delinquent children. The true age of reform began with the establishment of juvenile courts. 1899, Illinois passed the Juvenile Court Act, and that basically said that we're going to treat juveniles differently than adults. They had a whole separate court system than adults. The terminology is different. We're going to get into that later on in the chapter here. The goals are different. By 1845, all states implemented some sort of juvenile court system, including California. The concept of Parens Partiae means that the state has not only the power, it has the obligation to act in lieu of a parent. If the parents aren't doing what they're supposed to do, protecting the kids, feeding the kids, you have certain obligations as a parent that you need to do. And if the state is not, if you're not going to do the job as a parent, then the state will take over the job. There's several things we'll talk about later on in the sections, such as child protective services that you can get involved in your case if you run into this situation. And unfortunately, if you get into administration of justice, you're going to run into this quite often, where parents have done something wrong, neglected their children. So let's move on to the next part of this lesson.